Okay, so welcome everybody. It's May 31st. We got a new person joining us today. That's Jim Young. So Jim is starting in the lab in the fall as a graduate student here at Virginia Tech. Jim, can you turn your camera on for just a second? I know your connection isn't fantastic.
Yeah, once I figure out how to get there, we go.
All right. So, Jim, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself, and we'll let the others online introduce themselves as well right after.
My name's Jim Young from Chesterfield, Virginia. I graduated from Radford a couple weeks ago, and with a lot of focus with a degree in geology, with a lot of focus on UAV and LiDAR and remote sensing techniques. So, hoping to continue that.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jim. We'll go on my screen from the bottom up. Rob, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Rob Dredowitz. I'm in Illinois at the moment, just recently graduated from Northern Illinois University. I do a bunch of VR stuff and video game development, stuff with Unreal Engine or Unity, mostly Unity. So that's my 2 cents.
All right, thanks, Rob.
Let's go. I'm Shalou. Yeah, I'm Shalou. I graduated from NIU too, and I'm an anthropology student actually. But Dr. Payne helped me with my thesis on investigating the spatial distribution of scent marks and lemurs.
All right, thanks, Shalou. And Lucas?
Hi, I'm NIU student number 3, a former student of Dr. Pingle, and right now I'm working as a contract archaeologist for Midwest Archaeological Research Services, and I'm interested in the application of photogrammetry in archaeology.
And Lucas, I think you've got some overlapping interest with Jim. So Jim has some photogrammetry and LiDAR experience looking at unmarked graves, doing some analysis of cemetery projects. So there's a little bit of overlap there, I think, at least.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and get started. Just a couple of quick announcements, and we'll kind of move into the meat of it. One is there's an Esri Python webinar next week. As far as I know, this is free to register for. So if you guys have some free time next week, this is June 5th from 1 to 2 Eastern time. Another quick announcement, there were some changes made to the recreational drone laws in the US. So for those of you flying under a Part 107, nothing has changed. But for those of you flying recreationally, things have changed or they are changing. And in particular, the gist is going to be that there's going to be a test that's required even to fly recreationally. I think that test is going to be quite a bit less meaty than the Part 107 test. And I should probably look into this a little bit more, but I've got my 107, so I kind of didn't pay as much attention to it. Jim, do you have a light credential?
I'm working on it. Just trying to study between doing work here at Radford. So.
Okay. There are some on the GitHub site. I don't know. Did you send me your? I don't think you maybe sent me your GitHub login yet, right?
Yeah, it's a JL Young 3.
Okay. If you haven't sent it to me in Slack, send it to me again. We've got a page in the lab wiki that's got some study guides for the Part 107. And Riley Harris, who's sick today, is also going through the 107 as well, so you guys can kind of compare notes. All right, so, and I think maybe somebody's got a mic that's picking up. Maybe Shalou, can you try muting your mic real quick?
Sure.
All right, let's check that out. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Okay, so we've got, let's see. So I did some consulting work. This was almost 2 weeks ago since we met last time. This was an old connection of mine. I haven't done consulting work very often, but a group called Instead got a hold of me and was interested in having me consult on a web-based platform that they were using for a location allocation problem. So the idea was in the developing world, they want to build a new site, they want to build a new lab. How can they kind of maximize the impact of that lab based on a number of different factors, but mostly population. So if they build a new hospital, what's its likely population catchment area? So it's kind of a classic GIS problem. But what they want to do is avoid having to use GIS architecture to do that. So rather than hire sort of a GIS analyst, they wanted to build a web platform that kind of does this one specific thing that people could use. In looking at that tool, I had a closer look at the WorldPop data set. So I think in my GIS classes, I've mentioned the global gridded population of the world data set that NASA's CDAC Center puts out. That's a 1 kilometer raster of where population is. And it's a really useful layer in all kinds of different analyses. WorldPop takes that a step further and takes that 1 kilometer data set and interpolates it down to a 100 meter data set. So much finer resolution. And essentially what they do is they combine a number of different layers. So you can see a couple of these listed here from their website. So distance to roads, coming from OSM data, night lights, things like that. Basically trying to allocate these pixels so that you're not putting population just sort of down in a region where population data usually comes from. You're kind of spreading it out to where you think things are. This is an example. Actually, I'll move to the next slide here. This is an example of what that looks like. So this is an area in Africa, a town called Maradi. This is Maradi, where you see that 111.52633. That's the estimated population for a pixel in that area. So that's a 100 by 100 meter pixel. One of the things that should stand out, though, is that these boundaries don't match up super well with that satellite data that you can see kind of peeking through underneath. In particular, the airport runway is being flagged as a high density area by the algorithm. The overall kind of matchup doesn't really line up too well with what you can visually see underneath. We've got smaller towns kind of down here. It's picking up some of these towns, but not all of them. So it's far from a perfect product, and that's fine. I mean, it's a active research layer. But one of the things I was really struck by is how much room for improvement there is. I think if I had a little bit more free time, this would be a project that I would probably be interested in taking on. But for incoming master's students, there's a ton of really interesting machine learning and crowdsourcing opportunities here. So MapSwipe is an organization that does crowdsourcing. What they basically do, if you guys haven't played around with MapSwipe, it's an app you can download for your phone. It interfaces with OpenStreetMap, and basically it tries to target OpenStreetMap efforts on places that are populated. So it'll show you a pixel on your phone, and it'll say, you know, does anybody live here? And you can kind of swipe through. And basically, I think all of these pixels are really ripe for a machine learning approach to try to allocate pixels based on what's going on in the satellite photos, as opposed to these mapped layers, which may be of good quality or may not be of good quality. So anyway, interesting applications there, I think, for the lab if somebody's interested in taking that on. Before I move on to this one, because that's going to be kind of a jerky slide, I worked with Riley Harris last week on imaging White Top Mountain here in Southwest Virginia. So we went down there and flew it with the DJI Mavic 2. This is the area. I don't know how well this is streaming in on your end. Does it look even remotely okay?
Looks like a slideshow.
Ah. Well, I'll post the PowerPoint and you guys can take a look at this. This is a Google Earth animation that I put together with Google Earth Studio. It's the first time that I've used Google Earth Studio, and if you haven't used that for making an animation, it's pretty awesome. So just go to Google Earth. I don't know, it's probably studio.googleearth.com or whatever. That's not a URL at all. Just Google Earth Studio and you'll find it. So this was an area, these are what are called bulbs on the top of the mountain. It's kind of a treeless area. And this one's at the peak of White Top Mountain. I didn't have a very good sense of this from the satellite photo, So once I was up there, I kind of got a better sense of it, and I thought an animation would be kind of an interesting way to send the information out. There's a YouTube version of this that you can look at. I guess I'll post a link later. I probably should post it there. Anyway, we flew Whitetop Mountain. We did 5 total flights. These are marked here in a Pix4D photogrammetry project. We did a 70% overlap on one of the flights, so you can see some of the circles there are bigger and not as tightly clustered, kind of that one in the middle. We flew 80% on the others. That was kind of important. The 70% didn't work out at all. We flew for 15 to 18 minutes. The Mavic has a total flight time of ostensibly 27 minutes. So I was being a little bit conservative after running into a long flight on the last time I was flying. And it was fairly windy that day. We ended up capturing about 2,000 images for the project. And I ran it under rapid mapping settings. Interestingly enough, the rapid stuff processes, I don't know, call it 5 to 8 times faster than the full processing settings, maybe even better than that. That was just to kind of get a quick view of it. But when I ran it at the full processing settings, it actually turned out worse. So you can kind of see how bad the reconstruction was here. Whoops. So we've got a layer that sort of came in vertically over here on the right, just a bad match. Over here on the left-hand side, you can see that we've got a vertical separation going on here. So I'm basically I was just sort of running this to get a quick look at it. I'm gonna turn this over to Riley, and he's gonna run it for real. But clearly there were some pretty significant problems with the reconstruction. This is kind of an interesting environment to fly in. This is the first time I've had to fly in an area that had really high vertical differentiation. So it was about a 200-foot drop from where we launched to the end of one of these scans, which was only a couple of 100 meters away. So it's fairly rugged terrain. So that was I think that's an interesting problem for the photogrammetric software to solve. It's not unsolvable, but here the ground surface itself is moving quite a bit more than what I'm usually used to flying, which tends to be either flat kind of Illinois areas or in Mexico, or at least not such steep, rugged terrain. So an interesting application. This is just kind of a screenshot of what the orthophoto looked like coming out on the back end. And the key thing here is how badly the 70% coverage area turned out. They recommend flying vegetation at 80%. I don't think that I've ever flown it at less than 80% before, but I thought the camera on the Mavic 2 is about twice as good as what I was using before. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of push the limits. The cost in terms of flight coverage, flying at 70%, if you flew at 10 minutes, let's say, would cost you 15 minutes of flight time at 80% coverage. So it's a pretty big jump. If you push that to 90% coverage, the flight time went to something like half an hour. So it's one of the key things to kind of keep in mind is that the coverage doesn't scale linear. Flight time doesn't scale linearly with coverage. You really pay some pretty big penalties. If I could have flown this at 85%, I probably would have, but 90% was just too expensive in terms of flight time. Overall, it turned out okay. You can kind of see an example of what it looks like when you zoom in. You get some pretty reasonable differentiation of the vegetation cover. The rapid settings produced an 8 centimeter per pixel resolution. Theoretically, with the camera, we would be able to get 2 centimeter resolution, but because the full settings didn't turn out right, it was just further than what looked good. But hopefully Riley can kind of reprocess the imagery and we can get that 2 centimeter resolution. This kind of presented an interesting challenge. So one of the things that we have to do as a lab is share kind of quite a lot of data, and figuring out good ways to do that is important. In the past couple of years, we've used Dropbox, we've used Office 365. Virginia Tech uses the Google Drive system a little bit more often. So this was a chance to try out the Google Team Drive with Riley. It has some advantages and some disadvantages. So all of these different kind of cloud sharing systems have kind of pluses and minuses. Dropbox is probably the most reliable for individual use, at least as far as I'm concerned, but it doesn't do very well with team use. unless you pay extra for some of the team products, which I suppose we could do, but it's kind of expensive. Whereas a lot of these projects, products like Office 365, OneDrive, and Google Drive are basically included in the university's arrangement. One of the benefits to using the Google Team drives is that it enables us to use the Google Drive file stream, which is different than the individual system. So these are sort of clients that you can install on your system. I used the individual backup and sync with Google before and didn't really like it at all, although I would say that these things evolve pretty quickly. So it was about a year ago when I tried it. But the Google Drive file stream seems a lot better to me. And in particular, one of the things that you can do is you can selectively sync not only folders, but individual files. So if I just need this particular LiDAR point cloud or this particular orthophoto, I can just get that as opposed to trying to sync up a particular folder. So that's kind of nice. I think in the past, people probably would have tried to just use a network attached file system, that kind of a homebrew system. I'm trying to avoid that. It's probably the cheapest way to get a lot of space up, but it's kind of just one more thing to administer. So hopefully we can make some of these systems work. So I just added a bunch of people to the Neil Google Drive folder that I made. I think you've got to have a Virginia Tech account to be able to use it, but I should probably look into that. Maybe that was one of the downsides of Office 365 was we couldn't share access between institutions, but that would be a thing for me to look at for the Google system. The way I think we're probably going to try to do this is not to have one big collective Neil folder, although we will have one of those. But I think that the idea is to kind of do it along the Riley, Lisa Kennedy model of, if you've got a thesis, then you share that with me. And then that way everything is kind of compartmentalized and probably will avoid running into file size issues or quota issues. I'm not sure what the total limit is on these things. But I would ballpark guess it at about 1 terabyte per drive. That seems to be kind of an industry standard. Earl's project used about 1 terabyte total. So if each of us has sort of 1 terabyte allocated to these little drives, that should probably work out okay. One of the funner projects that I got to do was work on the 360-degree photosphere. We've got a 360-degree spherical camera for the lab. I mounted that to our old, or my old Iris Plus drone and flew it. The nice thing is we could kind of use all the parts we had before, so you can see it attached via kind of a standard GoPro mount point on the front. This is what one of those images looks like when it's captured. This is essentially, so it's an equirectangular format, so it's 180 degrees in the vertical axis and 360 degrees in the horizontal axis. You get one neat kind of composite map on the, or not map, but image on the back end of that, which you can then turn into a photosphere, which I'll show you here in a second. I need to play around with some of the settings. So because I'm not using a gimbal, the drone is kind of unsteady in flight. There's all these sort of little micro adjustments that it's making as the wind takes it and whatnot. So I need to set the shutter speed a little bit faster. You can see a little bit of ghosting here. But the cool thing is that image could essentially be dropped into an A-frame container. Rob and Hudson have been working with A-frame a little bit. So I'll show you the code here in just a second, but I'll show you this live, or you guys can pull this up. So it's tpingle.org/share/A-frame. You guys can try this out on your own. And so you should be able to kind of pan and zoom and just kind of look around this whole photosphere and this kind of lightweight container. Is that coming through the web page or not?
It is, yeah, for me.
Okay, cool. So the neat thing about this that we care a lot about is what you should see on your lower right-hand side is the goggles. So this allows you to enter it with virtual reality goggles, or Google Cardboard, or basically anything else that you've got to, that you want to kind of use to look around. So it's kind of fun to look around on a web page, but the really cool thing is to be able to kind of enter this in VR and do it that way. The application for this is the, one little thing here. This is all the code it takes to put that online. So this is the entirety of the HTML web page. It's literally just the JPEG that I got from the camera, and then this tiny little bit of code. We're pulling in some JavaScript here, and then just an A scene. So it always impresses me how little code it takes to put one of these things up online. I did have to specify a rotation tag, so you can see that the mounting is kind of eccentric. Ideally, this is, the lens is up at the top. So it has a 225-degree rotation kind of back towards the body of the drone. The application for this, since some of you may not have been on the call, is I'm doing a project with the National Weather Service where we're trying to do some drone scans of tornado scars. And when we flew it, we had the DJI goggles, and the people that were kind of there, the students that were there with me, I could let them kind of look around and see it live. But I realized that if we just take a 360-degree photosphere, then we can let them do this in the lab or in the classroom. So I'm going to go out and fly one of these scars with the camera and take some imagery and then bring that back. So that's kind of what we're shooting for. And then not only should you be able to do that in with VR goggles or Google Cardboard, but we're hoping to get this into one of the big VR rooms. So if you guys have seen like virtual reality cubes and things like that, that's kind of where we're headed with that. The lab webpage is up. That's been a goal of mine for the last couple of weeks. So we finally made some big headway on that. So this is the gist of it here. Let's see, I'll pull this up. You guys can see the web page okay? At least it's loading.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll just kind of talk you through it. We just got a main page. All of this is up for grabs. I've got a slider on the main page, 3 slides to start with. The first page is kind of an entry. Second page, a little bit about what we do. And then a third page that's kind of recruitment for undergraduates and graduate students that are interested in the lab. Not all of the stuff is filled in here. So the about page is done. I need to fix some of the responsiveness here. It's okay, but I figured out some ways to improve this. I don't know that I'm going to leave the word cloud here. There's Rob working on the AR sandbox. So I'll probably have, I don't know, maybe 8 total slides on this page. This is a video that I took flying at NIU when we were there. Some field work from Mexico. A lot of these text sizes need adjustment and stuff like that, so it is a work in progress, but it's nice to kind of see it coming along. This is one of our terrestrial LiDAR scans. And then what I wanted to talk to you guys about was the people pages. So I've got current lab members and alumni. I'm just kind of throwing these in there together. And especially with Lucas and Chalou on the line today, what I thought I might do is I can either put you guys under current lab members, or maybe I'll create something that's more like an affiliate member or something like that, people that kind of come and join the lab now and then. But I'd love to have you guys on the page if you're participating in the lab, if you guys are open to that. If you guys want to unmic for just a second, thoughts on that?
Yeah, that'd be fine with me.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. That's cool.
Okay, cool. And then Jim, if you can send me a picture that you, well, actually Jim, Lucas, and Chalou, if you've got a picture, especially kind of like an action shot, something that you're doing something interesting that somebody's gonna, showcasing a little bit about what you do, that'll be the best.
Yeah.
Okay. So got a lot left to do on that front. So a big part of this is really just about advertising, recruitment, kind of, getting the word out of the stuff we do. But eventually we'll want to have some things, most labs will have something like publications or products or things that they've done. So we'll have something like that up there. It needs to be mobile ready and things like that. But if you guys have comments about stuff you'd like to see, it's probably another week out from being done. And even then, I'm very open to suggestions about what we'd like to see. Getting close to wrapping up here. I know I'm kind of going a little bit long today. I've been working on getting the open source drone back. I bought these parts when I got to Virginia Tech, and then most of the parts have been just kind of sitting around. But the open source drone is about halfway done to getting rebuilt. Some new parts, some new pieces, and so I'm excited to get that up in the air again. I've been printing the 3D printed parts with PETG this time. I don't love this material. We usually use PLA Plus, which is not the strongest in the world. ABS is pretty strong, but it doesn't do well on some of these really detailed parts. They say that PETG is almost as strong as ABS, and I guess we'll find out the next time we crash. I had some trouble getting PETG working, so these are mostly here as kind of a note to self. Most of it had to do with sort of getting it to stick to the bed. So getting the Z offset on the 3D printer set up correctly helped with that, and then getting the temperature settings right. These are kind of pasted here, again, just as kind of a note to me. Last big announcement, we've got a lab demo on June 8th. So if people are going to be around and can help out with that, I think Riley is going to be around, so that should be enough. I don't really know what to expect. The college kind of approached me about a month and a half ago and asked me to put something together. So we'll probably just, I'll give a short presentation and then we'll talk a little bit about some of our projects. So that's pretty much it for me. Last time, the big goal was website development, which has been going okay. It takes a lot more time than I thought, but something that needs to get done. And then the Python code for the GPS tagging of images, I haven't touched that, so maybe after the lab demo is done, I can get back to that. Goals for next time, I need to fly that tornado scar and capture a 360-degree image. There's a spot over by Lynchburg where they had a tornado about 3 or 4 weeks ago, so I need to scan that one. The lab demo is coming up, and then the RU manuscript still needs a ton of work. So that's it for me. Sorry again to go a little bit long here.
Hey Tom, there was one thing I saw in your slides with the drone and the 360 camera.
Yeah.
You have it pointed in a way that's like has both the has the two cameras facing outwards and not downwards. Are you getting like artifacts along the ground? Is that what those those shearing things can be? Is because those two cameras aren't lining up?
Yeah, that could be. I should look and see if that's true. It should be kind of in a line, right? Along the, we should be able to see a line of artifacts, right?
Yeah, it should be just like a shear, like a perfect shear, like perfectly in line with where that where the two cameras meet, more or less. And sometimes you'll have like white balances on the two cameras, so one side will be brighter or darker or something like that.
Yeah, that is a really good point. Yeah, I'll take a look at that. Thanks, Rob.
Yep.
Okay. Rob, you want to go next?
Sure. Let me figure this out first.
Yeah, I got to figure it out on my end too. I'm not sure what's going on with my.
I think you need to stop yours first before I can share mine.
Yeah, I don't have that screen up. Here we go. All right.
Let's see if this works. Does that work?
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. Okay, so here's my report for today, May 31st, 2019. Not a whole lot, but a couple of slides. So I managed to get the Google Cartographer working with the provided files. I'm sorry?
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, the only problem is it's only with the provided bag files. I need to take a more in-depth look into like the bag files you provided. There's a couple of steps you need to add. Like you need to make sure like you have like certain configuration files set up properly to make sure it works with your data. And there's a few other things. I wasn't able to get it running, but I can take another crack at it and see if I can get it working. There is one. I'm sorry?
Oh, nothing. That's awesome. This is great.
Yeah, there is one issue with it though, is that it doesn't like to work well with the HDL GraphSlam in the same workspace. They use two different builds or two different building programs. Google Cartographer uses Catkin Make isolated, and then HDL GraphSlam uses just Catkin Make. I'm not quite sure what the difference is, but they don't like to play well together, and they start throwing errors when one of them's in it, or when you're trying to build one while the other's in it. So there's that. But yeah, that's Google Cartographer.
Let me give some background since I think a lot of people are on the line that haven't seen this project in a while. So this is a terrestrial LiDAR scanner. And it's software that Google put out to kind of merge a lot of those frames together. So the scanner that we use in the lab, they use on a lot of different applications. Autonomous vehicles particularly use this LiDAR. And so there needs to be some software that kind of stitches each of those frames together. So we've been playing around with this. So what you're seeing over on the right-hand side there is a stitched together kind of composite point cloud from Google Cartographer based on this Velodyne laser scanner. And the cool thing about
that's
this,
a 2D scan.
Right. Yeah. The cool thing about this LiDAR scanner is that it's mobile. So it's the kind of thing that you put on a backpack or put on a UAV or put on something like that. So unlike a lot of the terrestrial scanners that other people might be familiar with, where you kind of set it on a tripod and it kind of scans the area, this is super flexible. Okay, you can go on, Rob.
Yeah. I also figured out you can have a desktop environment on your WSL subsystem Linux subsystem for Linux thing. There's a couple of steps into it, but it's kind of interesting. It just works. So you pretty much just have a window that's Linux, like a Windows window that's just Linux on the inside, and it just works like any Linux distribution you have.
Wow.
It's kind of interesting, but there's a few different settings with X server you need to set up to make it work properly without it like freaking out and throwing windows all over the place. But it could be useful if you want to have a single spot where all your ROS stuff is on Windows. So you just have like a single window, and then you open it up, and then you have all your terminals with the desktop environment and RViz, and it's all in one spot more or less. So,
cool.
Yep. That's about it with that.
Instructions on that for on the wiki site?
No, I can put those up there though.
Okay, cool.
One other thing I didn't add a slide for, but I did start playing with was the Mapbox SDK. I downloaded that and got it working with Unity, not with the latest version of Unity, but with Unity 2018.3, which is the previous version.
Okay.
It works pretty smoothly. You do have to make an account and get like a key to your account, and then you put that into the editor, and it works pretty smoothly. It does run really like nice, and it works pretty well. And it doesn't slow down Unity that much unless you set all the settings to max, like view distance and stuff. But other than that, it works pretty well.
If you, one of the ways that you can kind of package this stuff would be to use like Screen capture. So what do I use? Screencast-O-Matic to record these, but you can use whatever you want. But if you have these little tutorials, what I want to try to do is kind of build up a library of these things so that the wiki is good. I think that's probably the best thing. But if the stuff that you're doing is pretty visual or intricate, that's a good way to share it out.
Okay, I've been using Windows Shift S and just sort of like dragging a square wherever I need to like capture.
Cool. Yeah, that'll work.
Okay. And on a more personal note, I got a phone interview at Midwest Immersive, which is downtown. And there is also other recently open positions at a place I've been applying to and being in touch with. So
Fantastic.
both those positions kind of fit the bill for me. At least it's like pretty closely matched to like my resume, I think. So there's that.
That's great news.
Yep. And that is my presentation.
Cool. Thanks, Rob.
Yep. Thank you.
Shalu, you want to go next?
So I don't have much of an update, but I was busy doing this logo yesterday, and then and then I also sent you an update on the lit review, so that's done. Oh, by the way, I'm writing a message paper with Dr. Kimball. That's what that's it. And yeah, I think for next week, I'm just going to focus on turning the lit review into part of my introduction, and then hopefully finishing the introduction. But let's see.
Cool. Yeah, that was good progress. Sorry, what was that?
I said, really, I feel like that took me forever.
It's summertime, and it's good to see any progress on it at all. I'm happy with it. That's great. And it's good because now I'm getting kind of hopefully the RU manuscript kind of wraps up pretty soon. Lily just talked to me and said that she's going to be open to working on it in the next couple of weeks. So that should free up some time for me to do my sections on it as well.
I had a question about one of your slides. You mentioned that as we post on webinar. Is that for beginners, or is that for people who already have experience with it?
I think it's probably for. Usually with those Esri webinars, they're everybody can kind of get something out of it. There's my dog, by the way. So I would say it's probably worthwhile to at least. They're usually pretty short. I think it's only an hour. So if you have the time, I think you'd probably get something out of it.
Yeah, can you send me like that slide or something?
Yep. In fact, I think I might have posted the link on the Slack channel under general, if you want to check in there.
Oh, actually, I had a question about Slack. I have my notifications turned on for it on my phone, but then I never get notified until it builds up to like maybe 30 messages. Is that a problem that everybody has, or is it just me?
I get notifications all the time, but notifications on Slack are kind of an issue. I know a lot of people have trouble getting those kind of dialed in right. And Rob, are your Slack notifications on?
Yes, there are some settings because Slack was meant to be used in like a workforce environment. They have like default settings that snoozing on. So like you only get certain notifications during like 7 to 5 or something like that. There's ways of changing that. I'm just not really sure exactly where. It's somewhere in the settings, and you just set the notification settings, and you just turn off snooze notifications. That may or may not help you, but that's the first place to look and one of the first things to change.
So yeah, up at the top, I think that you have notification settings, and then I think that the channels that you're on have notification settings as well.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
At the top of like the general channel on the web page, there's notification preferences, and then you can say to be notified for all new messages, just mentions or nothing. So that would be a thing to check to make sure that those are set the way you want them. Oh, I didn't know that there was a notification for everyone. That's cool. All right. Cool. Anything else, Shilu? Okay. Lucas, you want to go?
Yes, sir. All right. Let's see here if I remember how to do this. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Yep.
All right, there we go. All right, so thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And I'm going to be talking about my work at MacTown and some of the photogrammetry that I'm doing there. So let's jump into it. The project itself, it's located within the MacTown Forest Preserve. This is up in Rockton, Illinois, at the confluence of the Rock and Pecatonica River. And why I'm interested in that place is when I was first introduced to MacTown, they were like, oh, they did an archaeological investigation here and they found this. They did an excavation over here, they found this. And I said, well, what's the big picture? And they're like, well, there is no big picture. And I was like, okay, well, they probably need a big pictures. And that's kind of the route I'm taking. So I'm going back through all the site reports. And some of the earliest ones are from the 1970s, where Beloit College did an investigation of the whole Rock River Valley, finding prehistoric material. And one of the sites, which is on MacTown, which is 11W0120, on the back of the form, it mentions that Mr. Buchanan helped Professor Boxer excavate southwest of Area 24002 after several limestone hearths were found. Can you guys see my pointer?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, so here's 24002. So somewhere south, like north is actually more like this. So somewhere southwest of this 24002. All right. So fast forward to 1993, archaeologists were commissioned to investigate MacTown. They were looking for the original road during the original road from 1836, where European settlers had been there, where the town's named after, all that stuff. That report is Mars number 237. And in that report, there's a previous archaeology section. And in that section, they read about the 1950s. So they went looking to see who did it, from where, and where the material is and what they found. And they ended up going to the Burpee Museum, talking to the curator, the retired curator, and another person who was involved in archaeology in the Rock River Valley during the 50s and 60s. And they discovered that Dr. Joe Boxer had recovered cultural material from his MacTown dig in 1957 or 1958. So they found the box of artifacts in the Burpee Museum during this investigation, and they found a human mandible and teeth, diagnostic arrowheads, and charcoal, but there was no report, no maps, no nothing else with it. And this is the rub, right? This is the problem. So they have human remains somewhere on MacTown, at least there used to be. And they did more interviews, and they, which I'll talk about Mr. Gleesman, who found some more, like a full human skeleton, and apparently he reburied it. But if there's human remains on MacTown, first off, the Winnebago Forest Preserve needs to know, MacTown Living History needs to know, because there's laws involved and they need to get in a program to protect and preserve a burial on their property. So fast forward again, and in 2008, I conducted an informal interview with Leroy Gleesman. Mr. Gleesman worked as a groundskeeper during the 1950s and was shown the excavation area. Mr. Gleesman has lived on he lives a mile from this map. He lives a mile to the west. He's lived at MacTown since 1927. He's getting close to 100. He knows the whole entire area. But I took a map and I showed it to him, and I had him draw the general location where he thought it was. And if we look here, this in red is pretty much what he drew. So I made a polygon of that in ArcGIS. This in blue here is the 1974 sites. I was able to georeference an aerial image from the 1940s from the Illinois Clearinghouse. They had a bunch of old aerial photographs. It was said it was in a garden, and that's where the garden is. That's besides the point. So I have a general idea of where the excavation was. All right, so now field work. And I did some data collecting. I got a work permit to go out and conduct a 20-minute flight over the area of interest. I took 22 photos with the DJI Phantom 3. It has a 2.7K HT video camera. And then I used Agisoft to build a 3D model with a texture. And out of the 22 photos, about 18 photos aligned. So it's pretty good for me. Usually it doesn't align that well, but it came out, the model was really detailed. So here is one of the photos that I took just to show you the resolution of the photographs that I was using. And then here's the model, and all right. There we go. There we go. All right, you guys see that?
Mm-hmm. Oh,
right,
well,
so,
wait. I see a slide.
Oh, you still see a slide? Okay, let
Yep.
me, technical difficulties. Give me just a second. I'm going to stop sharing real quick. I'm going to share that. All right, can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're in business. Okay, so I publish some of my models on Sketchfab. I just like what they have. Like they can do like some vignettes and all these other fancy tools to look at it. But as you can see, it came out pretty cool. One of the cool things about it is this is a pile of like landscaping debris, but you can actually see the tree trunk actually came out in the model. You can see the I thought that was really cool that I got that amount of detail.
Oh, yeah.
And then also there's like the circular feature here. I didn't even notice that when I was out walking around. I went out there and was like, sure as the world, there it is. I don't know what it is. It kind of looked like somebody turned around maybe or something. But anyway, I thought that was pretty cool. All right. Okay, so that's the model. All right, so using tools in Agisoft, georeference EM was generated and uploaded into ArcGIS. By manipulating the raster bands and colors, I could exaggerate the intensity to find variations in elevation. And I found some a pretty cool looking anomaly. So this is just to kind of like reference where Mr. Gleesman highlighted on the map, and then the model that was the digital elevation model that was made. And here on the left-hand side is where I manipulated the bands, and as you can see, there's kind of like this coffee stain looking anomaly. And on the right here is kind of a hill shade feature that Agisoft has, and you can still kind of see this weird looking anomaly. Mm-hmm. So to confirm my bias, I made some 1x1 meters squares, and I was able to stack 3 in there. I can convincingly put 3 in there, which makes me think I've solved the case, right? I'm all done. I'm just joking. We have to we have to confirm. So anyway, I found a slight variation in the soil. That was approximately 1x3 meters in dimension. When I measured it, I wouldn't say this is very accurate, but it's 3.986 meters squared. But you know, it's not enclosed, so I just kind of like cut off where I thought it would be cut off. Anyway, so there's problems. It could just be an artifact of the photogrammetric process, like something in the software just picked up, or there was a pixel that matched another one that wasn't, you know, quite the same. And also, if it is a subsurface feature, then it might just be heavy disturbance, because that area has been used by maintenance for 50 years. So it might not necessarily be the excavation by Dr. Boxer during the 1950s. But one thing's for certain is I need supplemental data to confirm the claim of the feature found on the digital elevation model. So I called Northern Illinois University. I talked to Dr. Carpenter, and his geophysics field team came out just yesterday. And they used ground penetrating radar and resistivity. And when you do when you do geophysics, you get the result. You don't get the results, but you get some of the information in real time. And there was some interesting things. So when they were doing the resistivity, one of the students came over to me and was like, "Where's this anomaly at?" And I kind of like showed them, and they're like, "Oh, well, we got huge spikes there." And I was like, "Oh, well, that's pretty cool." And then when they did GPR, they have like two paddles, think like the ER paddles, but they're large, and you put them on the ground, and then you hear a beep, and then you move them, beep, and then you move them, and it shows the data on the computer. And he's like, "Oh, that's a big infraction." And Dr. Carpenter's like, "Where's that?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's right there, right where they're standing." So there's definitely an infraction. There's definitely some spikes in data. So I'm pretty interested to see the results. I'm supposed to have like a month turnaround, but I'm still very excited. All right, so what's next? So the next thing I'm going to try to do is generate a model from images taken from the ground. I just got a working model here. In the circle here, there's like these kind of blank spots or low-lying areas. So there's definitely like some sort of dip that's going on here. And I actually took a ladder out and climbed up on my ladder, took a picture, climbed back down, moved the ladder over, climbed up the ladder, took a picture. And there was a couple of issues with this. So you guys talk about Pix4D, so I downloaded, I got the trial version. And one of the things about the GPS data from my photographs is that they're too close together, and my accuracy for my GPS for my phone isn't good enough. So a lot of that data was useless. So when I go back to do this, what I'm going to do is get a sub-centimeter GPS and take a point, take a picture, take a point, take a picture. And I think that'll help me. And then I can tag those images with the geospatial data. Another thing is that I'm only interested in the ground. And what Agisoft was doing is they were trying to align stuff in the background. So that's why I got this mess here. So I'm going to mask off the noise in the background and just try to get the ground, and that should give me a better model. And there's a third problem is when I took the first pictures with the drone, the area was mowed over. It's maintained grasses. But when I took these photos, there was some clover leaf that stood up above the grass, and that may, what's the good word? It may dilute my data. It would mess up my data essentially. So that's one thing I'd like to do. And then the next thing is obviously ground truthing. So we have all this non-invasive work done, but to see if there's any truth to it, I'm going to have to dig in the ground. So in 2020, I've already talked to the Mactown Living History and the Winnebago Forest Preserve. And for 2020, we're probably going to excavate in this area to see what's going on. So even if we don't find a burial or bodies, we can see what type of disturbance there is, look at the soil profile. Another thing that I'd like to do for this particular project is I'm going to be going to different archaeological sites. So for this map right here, this is the Middle Grant Creek project, but it's all in tall grass prairie. When I emailed Dr. Pingle about this research, he wrote back about some of the limitations of photogrammetry. And he's talked about vegetation, how, it essentially can't punch through that. But I thought maybe if the grass or the vegetation is homogeneous, that maybe I can still see subsurface features. So I reached out to a Dr. Scher he's from University of Notre Dame, and he wants me to come out and do he wants me to fly my drone and make some maps for him and do my photogrammetry, which is going to be part of this. And then the other project I'm going to do is down south in Charleston, Illinois. I think it's Charleston. And they have a site that's in a heavily wooded area. And I'm going to do 2 flights. I'm going to do 1 flight with just natural vegetation. And then we're going to mow the area and do a 2nd flight and see if what type of, the differences in the models. So the question is why is this important? And so for me, it's important. I work in CRM, which is cultural resource management. There's not a lot of money in CRM work. I work for peanuts. I just do it for the love of the craft, essentially. And the thing is if you outsource doing geotechnical work, that's thousands of dollars off your contract that you have to spend. Or if you put that in your proposal to get a contract, you may lose to a lower bidder who has that type of material or has that type of equipment. But the thing is, so CRM, if I can use photogrammetry in a way to find subsurface features, that would be a great tool for small CRM firms to use. So that's why I want to kind of flesh this whole thing out. Anyway, that's all I got going on. Thank you. If you have any questions, let me know.
Yeah, I got a couple of comments, Lucas. So one, your idea about can you use differences in vegetation height to find like subtle depressions in the ground surface.
Yes.
So the idea would be that the vegetation sort of echoes what's going on the ground, right? So like if you see a depression on the top of the grass,
Yeah.
like there's a depression at the ground level, right?
Well, not necessarily. Well, it might not necessarily be just the ground surface. It would be that there's like bricks underneath the ground. The growth of the vegetation would be stunted because it doesn't have as much nutrients or a soil depth. So the homogeneous or the homogeneous vegetation could echo just any type of, if there's some sort. What am I trying to say? Pretty much if there's any type of even differences in nutrients in soil, you could probably figure out. So
potentially, although that would depend on how much noise there is, right?
Yes, sir.
So the bricks thing seems plausible. The soil, I don't know. I had a similar idea when I was down in Mexico last year, and I've got a paper that I reviewed earlier this year where they were kind of trying to do the same thing. So I can send that your way if you're interested.
Please.
I think they were trying to use LiDAR to do it, but the idea is that, we've got information about what's going on in the canopy. Can we use that to fill in our gaps of knowledge of what's going on the ground? So similar, not the same, but maybe some ideas there. The other thing is your GPS. So if you take a sub-centimeter, or if you take a centimeter level GPS, the quality of the fix is still going to be related to how long the GPS sits there.
Yeah.
So you're better off taking 3 or 4 or 5 points that you can then georeference if you can leave it sitting there for longer.
Yeah.
So rather than trying to georeference each photo, just try to georeference a couple of features.
Okay, so like maybe like the major corners or something.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah,
and then,
that's good.
And then you can leave them sitting there for longer, and that should work out okay. I would be, if you do have centimeter level precision, one of the things I guess that I would be interested in is if you could take that out to something like a tennis court where the lines are clearly visible and you know exactly what those distances are. I'd be really interested in sort of getting some feedback in terms of the real accuracy. I've been working with GPS for a long time, and I think that a lot of companies kind of overstate the accuracy of their units. So I would be, if you can get some kind of metric of an objective cross-referencing, that would be good.
Excellent. All right, I'll do that.
Any other questions or comments from anybody else?
Nothing from me.
Jim, you've done some photogrammetry work. You have anything to comment on?
I lost him.
Oh. All right. Cool. Well, if nobody's got anything else, that's probably enough then for today. Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for taking the time out, and thanks Lucas and for joining us again, and Jim, welcome. Good to see you again, Shalu and Rob. All right, we'll see you again. The next scheduled lab meeting is in 2 weeks, so hopefully we'll see some of you then.
Thank you.
All right, bye everybody.
Bye.
See you.